Hey, thank you for joining us for this week in Jacksonville Business Edition. We focus on economic growth and development, as you know. And our guest today is Peter Quinter, globally recognized U.S. Customs and International Trade attorney with the Florida law firm. You see it behind it, Gunster, one of the largest firms, I believe, in Florida. Peter, tell us just a little bit about your background. And our focus today is going to be tariffs and the impact on people, companies, et cetera.
Thank you for hosting me. My career right after law school, I started as an attorney in the Chief Counsel's Office of U.S. Customs. So I see the government perspective from the Customs and Homeland Security. I deal with CBP officers every day, U.S. Customs meaning U.S. Customs and Border Protection. I've joined a big law firm, Gunster, some years ago, and I lead the U.S. Customs and International Trade Department, assisting importers and exporters moving their goods in and out of the United States with as little difficulty as possible. Jacksport, of course, in Jacksonville is a huge part of the economy in Northeast Florida and for the United States because of the quantity of cargo that moves in and out of that port.
Recently, we had Jacksport, their CEO, give a state of the port kind of message, and hey, growth, 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 growth. So lots of activity there. And it seems like lots of impact that could happen if the tariffs proposed by the Trump administration are fully enacted. Give us the broad picture there and maybe help some people if they don't really understand how tariffs work.
Right. So it is the topic of the day. And even in my law firm, people are stopping by my office saying, you know, what is going on? So, and I just gave a speech at the Florida Bar Conference in Miami on the topic was the future of international trade under the Trump administration. So tariffs are, think of them as taxes on imported cargo, paid for by the U.S. importer. So whether the cargo is coming from China, Brazil, it doesn't matter. If it hits the United States shores, unless it's going to a foreign trade zone, there is a tax or customs duty that is paid to U.S. Customs. The tariff determines the percentage of duties. It could be duty-free if there's a free trade agreement. It could be 10%. It could be 260% if it's subject to anti-dumping duties. So what is the nature of the product, how it's classified, what country it's coming from, all determines how much the importer will pay U.S. Customs for that duties. Right now, as you probably know, under the U.S. Mexico-Canada Free Trade Agreement, cargo made in Canada or Mexico comes into the United States duty-free. The proposal was by Trump was to change that just last Monday.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that's been deferred for at least a month. I hope it does not happen, but we'll see. And then you read about U.S. steel and aluminum from around the world being also subject to a tariff. So that's supposed to go into effect March 12th. All of these are negotiating tactics by the Trump administration to obtain some benefit. But if they don't result in a resolution and those tariffs do go into effect, it's going to affect all of the people in greater Jacksonville area, Florida, and the United States, because prices will go up.
So what's the benefit? Why is that important? What's the plus side for tariffs, or who benefits from tariffs?
So there's a worse downside before we go into that.
Okay.
Because other countries, whether it's Mexico or Canada or China, which did have a new 10% added to already their, we call the Trump tariff from his first term, the 25%. So there's 25% already that was assessed on merchandise coming from China to the United States that Biden kept. Trump added another 10%. So now it's a 35% addition to the normal tariff on products from China. Trump has threatened the European Union specifically. And already, if these steel and aluminum tariffs go into effect, obviously we get a lot of steel and aluminum from Canada, Mexico, and the European Union and Asia. So they're talking about having reciprocal tariffs against U.S. products going to their countries. So other countries just don't stand back and allow the United States to impose tariffs. They're trying to, in their own way, negotiate or threaten tariffs against U.S. products going overseas. So that's what we call a world trade war. That's not what we want. So there is a double bad side, cargo coming in and less cargo going out. The good part, I think the Trump administration, and Trump in a way is brilliant. You know, he uses the tariffs that can be imposed by the United States, which is the largest trading country in the world. Everybody wants to trade with us to achieve other things that are not necessarily trade related. So if he wants to stop fentanyl narcotics coming in from Mexico to the United States. He wants to stop illegal immigrants from crossing the Mexican border into the United States. He uses tariffs as a way to start the conversation. And so far, he's actually done, depending on your perspective, he's been successful in his negotiations.
Yeah, that certainly is something that we'd heard from the Trump administration with the tariffs. Hey, this is not a trade war. And I think the implication certainly was these are negotiations and we're looking for other help. As tariffs are implemented, though, how do Jacksonville businesses or Northeast Florida or what have you, how do businesses make adjustments to deal with that?
Well, that's exactly why I've been flooded with phone calls ever since the last couple of weeks. So for example, it's just the one that did go into effect already, 10% addition to tariffs. So every importer of Chinese products is going to pay 10% more than they were paying before. What do they do with that cost? They can try and negotiate a reduced cost that they're paying the Chinese producer. They can import less, or they can pass on that 10% cost to the distributor and eventually the retailer. And that's the consumer, ultimately, you and me, who's going to pay more for products. Most Americans don't realize what we eat, the cars we drive, the mobile phones we use, the laptop or computer screen that we're looking at right now are made overseas. So people don't yet realize the effect a 10% tariff on Chinese products could have in the United States. We're trying to work out situations where products are just in time. Maybe they come to the United States and they go to a foreign trade zone. Jacksonville has a big one. So cargo goes into a foreign trade zone. You don't pay customs duty at that time. Only when you withdraw the cargo from a foreign trade zone to commerce in the United States do you pay the duties. So it may be that we delay the imposition of the duties for some cargo. And other cargo, it's just, there's no way to avoid it. You're going to pay that extra 10%.
If I'm an American business, does this help me? Because hey, it means that my products don't necessarily have those tariffs or taxes that are due in American sales. Is that
right?
accurate?
Right. So it all depends your perspective. It can help you if you're a U.S. domestic producer of the same product for which you have a foreign competitor. Because now the foreign competitor product's 10% more expensive. Your product becomes relatively less expensive. So if there's a substitute product made in the United States, those U.S. producers will do better. I think the dream is, and I think it's a dream because it's not realistic. I think the dream is if we add tariffs on steel, aluminum, some of the other products, that somehow there'll be more steel and aluminum made in the United States. That's not true, at least as of the first term of the Trump administration. I don't see how it's going to be effective unless this is a permanent long-term tariff that we're not going to adjust every time there's a different administration. Because if you're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on an industry, you want to have security that there's not going to be a change in policies.
The example I'm hearing right there is electric vehicles.
Right.
Big push, companies have to react. I've got a deadline, and then a new administration comes in. No, that's not the case anymore. But that's part of business anyway, right, Peter? I mean, you're constantly trying to adjust to whatever the market conditions are.
It is, but for vehicles, it's actually a really good example. I'm glad you brought it up. I was just over in Asia, and they were the most beautiful electric vehicles I've ever seen, all made in China. China is the number one country for U.S. exports, for U.S. exports of many products, including the motor vehicles. And we, as you probably know, we don't import any vehicles from China. The European Union didn't have that rule. They were allowing Chinese vehicles to be exported to their countries, and they were very successful. That is, China selling the electric vehicles in the European Union, pushing out the local manufacturers. BMW was not selling as many electric vehicles. The same with the other European manufacturers. So now they're restricting electric vehicles made in China to go to European Union. I think we're going to fall behind. If we in the United States don't make more electric vehicles, whether it's GM or Ford or whoever, we need to find a way to make electric vehicles in the United States compete with the rest of the world, because the rest of the world is going electric.
Before we wrap up here, it's a topic we could go on for a while
Right.
on, but specifically, I guess, to people in Florida or in the region, what do businesses do to potentially prepare for the future? And really the uncertainty of, I hear there are going to be tariffs, maybe a tariff is coming, maybe it's just negotiating. What do we do to prepare?
Right. So for the average consumer, the average business person who's not in the import-export business, you're going to end up paying more money. That's just the way it is. If the tariffs are implemented, even with the small ones that we've already received from China, as you might know, Mexico, then Canada, Mexico, Canada, and China are our three largest trading partners in the United States. For other companies that have import-export concerns, like I said, the use of foreign trade zones, the distribution and supply chain, where you make a product is very important. You might make components in China, and they may be transferred to another country. It's substantially transformed into a new product in that second country, let's say Mexico or Brazil, becomes a product of Mexico or Brazil, then can enter the United States duty-free, hopefully. That's what a lot of customs lawyers are doing now to provide advice to clients who are trying to reduce the cost of tariffs that are implemented by Trump. But as you said, there's a little chaos here. We're all guessing what will happen next week, and it's hard to know.
Peter, if you're at liberty, can you tell me any of the personal experience, things that you or the firm are going through right now with
Yeah.
businesses who are trying to manage this?
Yeah, so I just was yesterday with a company that imports bathroom fixtures from all over the world. Beautiful merchandise. Some of it's from Thailand, some's from China, some's from South America, some's from Europe, and we have it, I'm sure, throughout Florida. It's one of the major companies. That company is now having to, of course, withdraw from supplying its merchandise anywhere from China, and may end up with limited supply to certain countries that President Trump favors. It could be Australia. He's favoring Australia, maybe Germany. So they're guessing to produce their products in those countries, which they hope will not be subject to a tariff at all from the Trump administration. So we are working with our lobbyists in Washington to try and understand the administration and hopefully influence the administration to be more trade friendly, because the United States and our quality of life depends upon not only being a great arsenal of democracy, but an arsenal of production where we sell American products overseas. And in exchange, we buy products from overseas. That makes it good for us and the rest of the world.
Well, the notion from President Trump and the administration has been, hey, we want American first. Can that be achieved without some of the pressure that tariffs apply?
Tariffs have been around since the country was created in 1789. So the question is, how do we use the tariffs? Trump was the first, I've been a customs and trade lawyer for almost 40 years. Trump was the first president in his first term to really use the tariffs effectively. And I think he was successful in his first term doing it. Like I said, we still call it the Trump tariffs. Other people call it Section 301 of the Trade Act. And as I said earlier, the Biden administration kept all those tariffs against China, that extra 25%. Trump is going way beyond China and way beyond certain product categories like steel and aluminum to say every product from every country. I don't think that is a smart way to go. So how he uses the tariffs in achieving the other desirable outcomes is to be determined. And I'm very eager every day to watch the news and listen to you and see what happens.
Yeah, we're definitely watching intently to find out what the impact is. But Peter Quinter, I appreciate your experience and knowledge of the market and what's happening specifically with tariffs and how they impact those of us who are saying, what is this all about? Peter, thanks so much for your time. And everybody who's been listening or watching, thank you for joining us on This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. Wherever you find your podcasts, go ahead and like, subscribe, or follow. New episodes come out every Thursday at 9.